My name is Sydney, and I work at Starbucks. I've been working there for about 2 years now. This story takes place last fall, and it all started, I would say, about midway through October. I was working a lot at the time, and worked all sorts of different hours. At my location, we would have a lot of regular customers that would come through on a daily basis to get coffee. We would also have some regulars who would sit inside and get their work done on laptops and things like that. I remember that I started to notice this one guy a lot when he would come inside and sit at this one chair that we had at the far end. He would sit there almost every single day in the same spot and just kind of look around. He didn't really seem to be working on things much. I did notice a laptop with him several times, but he wouldn't always use it. Sure, I didn't just stand there watching this guy at work, but I would glance over and see him all the time. It came to the point that he was there pretty much every single time that I was working. I noticed him, but I didn't think much of it until a coworker brought something to my attention. She said that this guy only seemed to be there when I was working. She said that she thought it was really strange. I thought this was weird, but figured that it was just a coincidence at first. However, over the next week, I couldn't help but realize this more and more. I also saw that the guy appeared to be looking at me many of the times that I noticed him. When the week was over, I asked one of my coworkers again if she noticed the man inside at all when I wasn't working, and she said no. I was getting really suspicious. Was this guy stalking me or coming in to watch me for some reason? The next time I worked, sure enough, the guy showed up within an hour of me starting. I sort of kept a more careful eye out to see if the man seemed to be just watching me the whole time. Every time I looked over, sure enough, he was looking at me. The guy was really starting to creep me out. He didn't even have a laptop with him at all this time. I decided that if I saw him again the next day when I worked, I would confront him and ask him what he was doing. When the next day came, I showed up to work, and before long, the guy was there again. On this day, I worked a much later shift than I had the day before. I decided to go ask the man what was up. I didn't want to be rude about it, so I went around and swept the floors. When I got to near where the man was, I asked him how he was doing. I then said that I saw him there a lot, and asked if he came here to work. I hoped that there was some strange, logical explanation that he would be able to explain to me then. The guy just said, yeah, he was getting work done. Then, I told him how some of us noticed he only seemed to come in when I was working, and I asked him if that was just a coincidence or what the deal was. The man responded by just getting up and walking out without saying a word. I was glad he was gone now, and I was sure he had just been stalking me at work, which had been making me really uncomfortable, and hopefully this would cause him to stop. I did feel kind of awkward about the whole confrontation, but during the rest of my shift, I felt a lot better about things and was more comfortable now that the man was gone. I got off of work that night at about 8 p.m., and afterwards drove the 10 minutes or so that it took to get back to my apartment. When I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment and parked my car, that's when I saw the same guy in a car parked right across from me. I couldn't believe it. I knew for a fact that this guy didn't live here, and I had never seen him there before. How did he know that I lived here, and why was he here? I chose not to get out of my car and go up to my apartment, but instead, I remained sitting in the front seat. I watched the guy's car to see what he was doing. He then looked over and saw me. After making eye contact, the lights of his car suddenly turned on, and he then started his engine and sped away. I was relieved to see him gone, but I was also nervous now that he knew where I lived. I went inside to my apartment, but had a really hard time getting to sleep that night. Luckily, the guy never came back that I know of. I never did see him again at work either. I'm really glad that I saw him in his car when I came home from work, because I feel like he had been stalking me to know where I lived. I think he was hoping that I hadn't seen him, and I have no clue what he would have done then. I think it was last spring when this story occurred. I remember that I had been out near the city and was on my way home. I was maybe 10 minutes from home when I passed through one of my local cities that has a shopping area and most of the stores and restaurants that you could think of. When I came through this area, I was pretty tired and in the mood for a coffee. It was probably about 9 p.m. or so I didn't want to go to bed just yet. I saw that there was a Starbucks up ahead, and I took the exit to stop there. The Starbucks was at the very far end of the shopping area and was kind of hidden by some other buildings and whatnot. I drove around to it and then pulled into the drive-thru. When I did, nobody else was in line. I then noticed that all of the lights inside were off. That's when I realized that they were closed. I felt so stupid because I knew that Starbucks closed at like 8 or even earlier in many locations. After realizing my mistake, I knew I could just get a coffee at McDonald's or something, and I pulled around the rest of the drive-thru to leave. But when I got immediately out of the drive-thru to the back parking lot area, I noticed that there were about 4 cars, all parked in the parking lot. Almost as soon as I noticed them, all of their lights turned on at once. I had entered the Starbucks through the other side and hadn't seen these cars at all. One of the cars then drove right in front of me, cutting me off and preventing me from leaving the parking lot. I also noticed another one of the cars start to drive, and that one ended up going right behind me. I was now blocked in by these cars. One was an SUV, and the others just looked like regular cars, but they all appeared to be dark gray in color and have very tinted windows. I was just waiting for them to leave, but they were just sitting there. I literally couldn't move my car very much at all. Then, I saw someone stick their head out the window of the car in front of me and look back at me. It was someone sitting in the back seat, and they were wearing a mask of a clown, and a pretty creepy one too. There was another person sticking their head out of the front window. This guy had on a ski mask with also sunglasses. Then, I saw literally all 4 doors of the car open, and 4 guys got out, all with masks on, and they seemed to have baseball bats in their hands. As soon as they started heading over in my direction, I put my car in reverse and backed out as much as I could. I then slammed on the brakes, probably inches from hitting the guy behind me. I guess I had a little more space than I thought I did, because I never felt or heard myself hit anything. I then sped out, again narrowly missing the other car, as well as the guys in masks, who one of them took a swing at my car as I drove away. He hit the left front headlight, breaking it, but I was just happy to be getting away from those guys. The car behind me started to pull out after me, but eventually stopped as I managed to get back on a busier road. I drove all the way home, thankfully without being followed, and after getting home, assessed the damage to my car. Pretty much just a smashed headlight and no other damage. The next day, I went back to the Starbucks parking lot and found pieces of my headlight smashed on the ground. I went to the police and made a report, and they took some photos. All in all, I don't think they ever found the guys, but I'm just glad to be okay. I work at Starbucks as a manager currently. The Starbucks is a building that stands alone, but it's in a parking lot of a shopping center with some other stores and restaurants nearby. Most days, I work until close, which is 8:30 p.m. at our location, and I'm the last one to be there, and I usually stay after to clean and things like that. Usually, it takes me until about 9 p.m., but sometimes later. I remember that one night a couple of months ago, after we closed, I stayed back to do some cleaning and other organizing work. It took me a lot longer than I expected or hoped, and by the time I was done, it was about 9:30. At last, I finally got my things and left. The parking lot at our Starbucks was very small, so I often parked a ways away in the nearby shopping center parking lot. It was an area where nobody else really parked and was kind of just extra parking spaces. I didn't mind walking a little bit farther. As I began walking back to my car, I realized how quiet it was. Pretty much everything else in the area was closed now, except for the Applebee's at the other end of the shopping center. Then, I started to hear footsteps behind me. It was as if the footsteps were coming straight from the Starbucks that I had been at. I thought it was strange, but kept walking. It took me less than a minute to get to my car, but when I had just about arrived, the footsteps seemed to be much closer than before. In fact, they seemed to only be like 5 feet behind me, and my car was the only car there. I was startled and turned around, but when I did, I didn't see anybody. Nobody was there at all, but I knew I had heard footsteps. I was at my car now and feeling really creeped out by this. I quickly unlocked my car door, then opened it and got inside. As soon as I got inside the driver's seat, I looked over to immediately see a creepy-looking guy staring right at me from outside my passenger's window. I knew instantly that he was going to try to get inside, and I hit the lock button just before he tried the door. I then started my engine. The guy banged on my window. He had a really dirty-looking beard and longer hair. He had to be the one following me in the parking lot. I then backed out my car and drove off. As I did, I watched the guy. He just stood there, waving at me now. He had a creepy grin on his face as he did. After that, I parked much closer and haven't parked in that location ever since.